In this video, I'm going to answer a question I got in the YouTube comments from a few weeks ago from a user whose name is Wookdar, I think. Kind of like nectar, Wookdar, nectar, Wookdar. Wookdar says, I would really like to know how you do bookkeeping. I always start with simple bullet points, ending, and extensive storytelling. Then getting tired, and that is the end. I like Forbidden Lands, but as I tend to play true solo, it's very hard to survive, especially if you want the survival part of traveling and exploration. Bookkeeping gets overwhelming. It's great to hear a check reference in reference to one of my previous videos. Any advice is welcome. Well, thank you for the question, Wookdar. I actually have gotten some really good discussions throughout the YouTube comments so far on this channel. So in this video or any others, if you do have questions or comments, let me know. I love to respond to them and kind of generate that discussion. But to answer this question, I'm going to, in this video, tell you how I do my bookkeeping. I like to match the mode of my bookkeeping and journaling and note-taking with the genre that I am playing in. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, then I talk a little bit more about what I don't do, and I hope that this is going to help answer your question, Wookdar. So, like I said, I like to match my mode of bookkeeping and journaling and note-taking with the genre, and the first example I have of this is Pendragon. As you know from my previous videos, I absolutely love playing Pendragon solo. And in Pendragon, I don't really do any bookkeeping. There's a player character sheet and there's an estate sheet. I use those for bookkeeping, but I don't really do any other bookkeeping outside of that. What I do is I first make sure that I follow and create my story using my family tree. Every single year I add to and update my family tree in Pendragon, and that in itself tells a story. You can see as the knights are born, you can see them become knights, hopefully they survive childhood, you can see them earn glory over their time, and then eventually you can see when they die, who their offspring is, who their partners are when they get married, things like that. The family tree itself starts telling a story without any other information besides those things. But then I also like to keep records for each knight that I play as a player character, a player knight. And I do this in the same way that it's described in Game of Thrones, where the main protectors of the king or queen, they have like this giant book with all the history of all the great deeds that all these knights have done. I like to do that, but just for the knights that I play. And that is, so I'm not free writing, I'm not journaling, I'm just kind of doing like a history as if somebody is recording their great deeds. So in this year, this knight did this thing, did this thing, did this thing. In this year, this knight got captured at this battle. In this year, this knight got married. In this year, this knight did this. And so it's just kind of a list, kind of like what Wookdar described here with bullet points. But I try only to do the stuff that excites me. And I think that's fun for 2 reasons. Because number 1, it keeps me motivated because I'm only doing the part that's exciting. But then number 2, it reflects like the history of these types of stories and an actual history where only the good parts are shown. And a lot of times the bad parts are left out, or stories are only told from a certain perspective. And so my gaming artifacts in this Pendragon solo RPG, my bookkeeping and my journals, they are artifacts of this perspective that really only tell the good story, the good parts of the story for this particular night. So in this way, I'm able to match the mode of my bookkeeping with these like records of the knights in the family tree with the genre of the story, which is medieval knights in shining armor style game. So that's my first example. My second example is directly referenced in Wookdar's comment with my Czech game that I call my Age of Alchemy. And basically in this game, I'm journaling as I play my solo role-playing game, but I don't think of it as like free writing or creative writing. I think of it as creating a game book. So instead of writing a story around what's happening, what I'm doing is I'm drawing maps, I'm creating random tables, I'm putting little vignettes about why this city or this little town is famous. Like, what is it known for? Oh, there's a cave. That's what this town is known for. There's a cave. Or what is this town known for? Well, this town is known for the fancy braids that they're able to create. They're the best braiders in the region. So if you want nice hair, you go to this town. And then they can braid your hair really, really nicely. And so those are the things that I include in this game book. And then every single time I go back to play, I can just kind of read through, and it's a fun re-exploration of this world that I'm creating year over year. in this old notebook that I have. So again, the mode of play that I have, and I forgot to mention, but it's this old dusty journal leatherback notebook that I got for a gift many, many years ago. I am using that as my mode of journaling and bookkeeping while I'm playing this game. And it's, again, instead of creating like a list of stuff or free writing, I am creating a game book based on the game that I'm playing. The final example, and probably my favorite one, is for any, really you can do this for any space RPG. I play Traveler solo a fair amount, and I love to record my notes on digital mediums because it's a sci-fi game, or use audio notes. So when I play a sci-fi game, I almost always think about my bookkeeping. I think about the story that I'm telling through the lens of a captain's log, because so many sci-fi stories have that as the storytelling medium. Star Trek is one of the main things to kind of think of. It always starts off with like the captain's log, and then the story is told through those notes. There's many other stories that do the same thing. And when I play my games, my sci-fi games, I like to do the same thing. I create a captain's log, usually just using a Word document. But since I'm typing on the computer, it kind of has more of a sci-fi feel than writing something down on paper, and I'm able to tell the story that way. Now, when I do a captain's log through a computer, I usually only try and include things that would be interesting to the captain, which in other words would be interesting for me, or things that are critical to whatever is happening. So for example, do I record every single time how much fuel is included? No, not really, unless that's like the key point of the game, which I really don't like bookkeeping fuel, so I usually ignore it. I just kind of have it as an expense if I need to, but I just don't worry about that because it's not interesting to me. What is interesting to me is if I pick up some odd cargo, right? Then I will just write in there, here is some odd cargo that I picked up. If I'm playing like an economy style game that gets really into the weeds on how much money you can buy things for at this starport and then go over here and sell things for, then maybe I'll put like each of those detailed items in there. But if not, I'm just going to give myself a pass and focus on the adventure of the game and not focus as much on all of the details, even if they're supposed to be included in the system. Like one of the great things about playing solo is you can decide what's fun for you and what's not, and just ignore the stuff that's not fun. That's what I do. Now with playing sci-fi, if you've never tried doing audio notes, I highly recommend it if you have the ability. I just use my phone, my voice memo app on my phone, but it is so fun to play a session and then, take a few minute break and then sit on your phone for 20 minutes recapping the session as if you're the captain. It's a fun little role-playing exercise. But the other thing that it does that I found really, really great is when I know I have an evening set aside where I get to sit down and play some a solo RPG, that day as I'm going about my day, walking the dog, doing my work, I can listen to my previous audio notes so I get caught up on the story and where things are at. And I can kind of get excited for playing the Traveler game or the sci-fi RPG that evening. So I highly suggest trying audio notes for a sci-fi RPG if you've not done a captain's log style audio notes so far. Now I've covered three ways that I use note keeping and journaling to keep track of my games. And again, the main theme for me is I match my mode of journaling or note keeping to the genre of game that I play. And I think that marriage, that connection makes it so much more fun for me. There's a few things I don't do. Number one, I do not bookkeep stuff that is not interesting to me, right? There's a lot of, if you think about like a video game with collectibles, I really don't like video games with collectibles. I don't engage in that part of the game. And same thing with RPGs, unless there's game mechanics tied very, very in an interesting way to recording everything that your character is using and carrying, then I'm just going to ignore it. I'm going to hand wave a lot of that stuff. If I'm playing a solo RPG and I need 50 feet of rope, I would just simply ask a question, would it be reasonable that my character would have 50 feet of rope at this time? If the answer is yes, then they have it, even if it's not written down. If the answer is no, then they don't have it, even if it's not written down. If that's too hard of a question for you to answer or for me to answer when I'm playing, I will just roll a dice. I'll just give a 50-50 chance and roll a dice, and then that's the end of that discussion. I don't need to think about it. I don't need to record it until the need for that comes up. Interestingly enough, the sci-fi game Traveler has a solution to this called the ship's locker, where any reasonable thing that you might need on a ship can be found in the ship's locker. And so you don't have to have the bookkeeping. You can just say, oh, that's in the ship's locker. so you can go get it. You can use the same thing for fantasy RPGs and just have a backpack that weighs, however much, if you're using encumbrance rules that you want it to, and just say, hey, same thing. If there's any reasonable thing that my character might need, it can be found in the backpack. And then that way you don't have to track all of the different items that, you might otherwise have to do if you're playing with a dungeon master and other folks. The other thing that I do, and this is really important because in my mind, there's a big difference between journaling activities, which a lot of games, especially like indie games, you see them a lot on like itch.io, they're different than solo RPGs. And so when I play my solo RPGs, I very much focus on recording the game in a way that's fun and interesting, kind of like how I've shown. But I want to make sure it's different than creative writing. If I do creative writing, I sit down and do creative writing. I'm going to write a story. I'm going to write whatever is in my mind, or just free write and bring a story out that I didn't know was there. If I'm going to play a game, I don't want that to be a creative writing exercise. I want it to be a game. And so I make sure when I do my bookkeeping, when I do record or journal what's happening in the game, I make sure that there's a very clear distinction to what I'm writing down when compared to a story that I would write during a creative writing exercise. And I found for me, that helps a lot. I think I see a lot of times online people get into solo RPGs, but they're not as interested in writing. And that turns them off from a lot of these solo games, because a lot of solo games or solo activities require creative writing. But solo RPGs don't need to. I mean, some of them are basically creative prompt exercises. I would argue they're not even games. So those, you need to do some creative writing for. But traditional solo RPGs, Pendragon, Traveler, Ironsworn, these games do not require journaling or they do not require you to write a story in a traditional sense. You can use other modes of bookkeeping similar to the ways that I have covered here in today's video. So I hope this helps. Wookdar, I hope this helps reduce the bookkeeping you don't want, give you some ideas for different modes for recording stories. I'm excited to continue sharing tips like this because, like I said, I'm kind of a big nerd and I love sharing the things that I think about with all of you. So thank you for watching. Let me know what you do for journaling and bookkeeping in the notes, and I will see you in the next video.